I'm Pastor Tony here at Peace Lutheran, and I'm here with Rabbi Lenette Goldman from Temple Beth Shalom.
Hi.
And we're doing a summer series all through Genesis. And I think one of the interesting things about looking through the Hebrew Bible, especially Genesis, is what you get out of some Hebrew words and phrases that are different than just reading it in English. But I also took just one semester of Hebrew in seminary, so I figured it would be great to talk with somebody who is a little more experienced with the Hebrew language. So thanks for doing this,
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me just start and ask, when you read through Genesis, what are some of the big Hebrew words, phrases that are surprising, interesting, that maybe if you were just reading an English version of the Bible that you wouldn't get?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are so many, and the rabbis, our ancient rabbis, really create this amazing sort of lens in that the way that you read Torah, you're supposed to ask questions and refer back and forth to the way these words may appear in other places, or this word is vague or it's very specific. What does that mean? So you could probably say that about every word, which we probably won't get to.
Well, how much time?
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. My Hebrew may be okay, but it's certainly not as maybe not that good. But I think one of the biggest words that are phrases that I think is really striking and maybe just sets the tone, I think in so many ways, is this term B'Tselem Elohim, which means the image of God. So we've got this whole story of creation, and on the sixth day, God says, let's create humanity in our image, in the image of God. And it's this term B'Tselem Elohim, B'Tselem meaning image. And actually, if you were to take a Litzelem to take a picture, that's the actual term for an image nowadays in modern Hebrew, and then Elohim being an image of God. So the idea being, well, it's really vague. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Because we all look different, completely different. So what can that mean for us? And I think it's this really beautiful idea that we're all made in God's image. We all have divinity. We all have sacredness. And the fact that we are different lends itself even more to each of us having a unique aspect of divinity in each of us. And that sort of truth that each of us have that is sacred, that we can learn from each other. So I think that's something that exists very much in both of our faiths also as kind of a cornerstone. And I think that's a beautiful way that the Torah starts with all of humanity being created in the image of God.
Yeah, I always love about that story. I think the church has often been guilty of yes, in the image of God, but some people maybe more than others. And it's well, men are made in the image of God, and then and Eve came second. It's well, not really.
Right.
And also that story in Genesis, it specifies male and female. This is everybody, not just some people,
right.
all of us.
Right. And Judaism is guilty of that too,
yeah,
for sure. So it's definitely an ideal maybe that we all try to strive towards in practice, for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, what else?
Okay, let me check our cheat sheet
here.
So in thinking of creation, God periodically through the days of creation, God says that this is good, reflecting on God's work. Feels pretty good about what God did. But after the creation
of humanity, that's the Tov, right?
Yeah, Tov. Yes, Tov. Yes, and actually, after God creates humanity, God says it's very good. So there's this sort of added specialness, I guess, to adding humanity as the sort of climactic moment of creation. But at the same time, everything else was also good. Everything else was also Tov. So we want to make sure we're taking care of our environment and our earth in partnership with nature and with all other living things. They was also, good. It was also intentional. And we know that this was maybe like a highlight reel. It's maybe not 7 literal days. And it still took, millions and billions of years. And then we can appreciate that along with the creation of all of us, how amazing it is, how very good it is that we're here.
Yeah. I forget I don't know who it's maybe started. Maybe it's been around for a while, but I know recently I've read some people talking about, there's a lot of writing about original sin and all of that, but like also before that we get this original blessing. Like before it's like, oh, there's the fall and all of that. Well, but before that, everything was tov, and we are tov me'od. Like God gave this blessing. We're good.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that the original sin is an interesting one. Yeah.
That could be a whole nother
That could be a whole other thing. Yeah, we don't see it as much in Jewish theology, but it certainly is the Garden of Eden is certainly this sort of catastrophic moment that changes everything.
Yeah.
Changes the course.
So
of
you don't
humanity.
like Jewish theology doesn't talk about original sin with that?
No, not really.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
So what is it then if it's not that original sin?
Yeah, so the idea of Eve and Adam being given this sort of directive. Well, it's technically Adam who gets the directive, and then Eve, I guess, sort of hears it from to not eat from the tree of knowledge, to know the difference between good and bad, or good and evil. Tov v'ra. So there's that tov again, which is really interesting, and ra being evil. And then she hears from the serpent, who says, you're not going to die. She thinks that you're going to die. She says, no. He says, no, you'll just know the difference between good and evil, and you'll be like God. And so Eve takes the fruit and she eats it, and she gives it to Adam, as we know. Excuse me. And then they learn, they know the difference between good and evil. And so I think for the rabbis, it's more about certainly disobeying, for sure. Not supposed to do that. But more about like the pursuit of knowledge, and that perhaps we were meant to eventually leave the Garden of Eden. That maybe we weren't meant to always be there. But yeah, the idea.
So it's more of like a coming of age story than.
Yeah, and that Eve pursues not. This is maybe more of a modern idea, but that Eve like pursues knowledge, and she may even be risking her life to pursue knowledge, and that may actually be something that we can even admire about Eve.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't call it like the fall or anything like that?
We wouldn't call it the fall. Yeah. No. But certainly there are commentaries that are maybe to our modernized problematic, or maybe that aren't thrilled with Eve and how she acted, but Adam then blames it on Eve instead of he also ate the fruit. You also
he was there the whole time.
He was there. He kind of knew the rules. That's right. And then we are sent out. So yeah, it's a really fascinating story about sort of the beginning of humanity, and right out the gate we are curious, and we are maybe not as obedient as maybe God expected. But the pursuit of knowledge, I think, being a value for everyone, I think. So
you can see both the negative of disobedience, but also the virtue of risking to pursue knowledge.
Yeah, and the word fruit in Hebrew is peri, and it just means fruit. So it's also interesting in Christian imagery, it really became an apple. And you also see it in Jewish imagery as well. But the rabbis actually have a different idea, because a fruit could be any kind of fruit. So they actually imagine the fruit not to be an apple, but to be a pomegranate.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So pomegranates being native to the land, and then also the rabbis associate pomegranates with knowledge. So there are 600 or more seeds in a pomegranate, which is wild, by the way. I didn't realize there were that many. That would not have been my guess. And there are 613 commandments, mitzvot, in the Torah. So the rabbis attribute the pomegranate with knowledge in that way. But also it's really interesting in how it may change the way we think of the story. Because when you think of an apple, you just pick an apple off a tree and you just bite right into it. Yeah. But if it's a pomegranate, then that takes some legwork, or you got to really put yourself into it. It's messy. So Eve had to find a rock, or she had to pry it open. And the seeds are small. You have to really get in there. So to me, it also changes. It's not that one's right or one's wrong. Yeah. It's all the interpretations are possible. But I think it's an interesting way to think about what it means to pursue knowledge, and I think the rabbis appreciate this also. It's sometimes under the surface, it takes work, it takes effort. Sometimes you find little kernels and you have to really dig in order to really, satiate yourself. And it may also maybe change the way that we think about the story too, when it means that Eve ate the fruit, maybe took a little bit more than just picking it off the tree.
Adds such a layer of depth to that story I'd never thought about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like I said, it's all interpretation. Yeah. It very well could have been an apple, but the
or
fact,
fig
or a fig, right? Exactly, which would also maybe change it a little bit. But yeah, I think that's such a cool sort of vagueness about the story.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we got?
What else do we got?
Oh, rainbow. Yeah, tell me about the rainbow.
Yeah. So rainbow, or in Hebrew, a keshet, is the sign that God creates after the flood with Noah and his family after they escape on the ark. And it's this beautiful sign that God won't flood the earth anymore. And just a beautiful image and a beautiful promise. The idea, especially after I feel like a rain or a storm, we've had a lot of storms this summer. That afterwards, hopefully, we see that rainbow, that side of peace. And I know it's certainly it certainly has a whole lot more meaning these days in lots of other ways too.
See, that's interesting because as a kid, I remember loving this image of the rainbow, this promise of peace. Okay, that's great. But then when you read the whole story, but it's also after God was like, I'm fed up with all of you, I'm going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
Like all the people, all the animals, except for enough to repopulate. Yeah. And everyone else will be murdered, and the screams of children will be heard from the ark. I don't know. And that's what we paint on our nurseries. How does that fit with the rainbow?
Right. Yeah. No, it is tough. It is a disturbing sort of underside to this story. It's violent. It's dark. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around. And I think it's okay for that part of the story to just be challenging. It's hard to imagine, was everyone that evil? Was everyone that irredeemable, that only Noah and his family were worthy to be saved?
And what made him so good?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. There's this great debate in the Talmud that asks, it's kind of funny, no offense, Noah, but was Noah as great as Abraham and Moses? Was he really this tremendous guy? Or was he just the best that there was at the time when, as we just said, everyone was pretty awful? Was he just kind of the Joe Schmo who was he's fine enough?
The bar was just very low in that generation.
Exactly. So I don't know. And Noah is also silent. So when we talk about words in Hebrew words, there's also the lack of words and the lack of dialogue that's really interesting. And it's hey, Noah, do you maybe want to ask God about what's going on and why you're building this giant boat and what's going to happen to all of your neighbors, and was Noah that great? It's certainly up for debate, and certainly compared to someone like Abraham, who was constantly arguing and dialoguing with God.
That brings me to a different one, because we just recently talked about we did the Akedah, the binding.
Ooh, nice.
Right?
Yes,
it's one of my Hebrew words. I know. But that's the one story. Before this, Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham is bargaining with them, if you find a few people, will you still save the city?
Yeah.
And then God's all right, how about go and kill your son Isaac? And Abraham just does it, no argument.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he talk then?
It's wild. Excuse me. Yeah. And also when you think of the Hebrew, when you think of love, that's one of the first times, it may be the first time, I'll have to check if you want to confess. We can check. But it's certainly one of the first times that we see the word ahava, or love, in whatever grammatical way it works in the word. But God reminds Abraham, he needs reminding. This the one you love. This your son, the one you love, right? Not his only son. We have Ishmael, but still.
He's gone.
Right. He's moved on. It is so perplexing that God would ask this of Abraham, and that Abraham would accept this. Did Abraham have sort of unquestionable faith that this would work out? Is that maybe a time when Abraham should have spoken up? And again, I think that lack of dialogue is really is really interesting. This is a story that we read every year on Rosh Hashanah, on our Jewish New Year.
Yeah.
It also ties in with the ram that eventually becomes the sacrifice instead of Isaac, and we use the shofar, the ram's horn. So there's that tie in there. But yeah, it's a really challenging story. And it's definitely one with a lot of questions. And it's very sad. Abraham and Isaac don't directly speak to each other after this story. Sarah dies, and it's sort of the end of this first sort of nuclear family. There's something that happens there.
Yeah, it's not all like rainbows after that.
No, right? It's really not. And maybe it is a reminder that it is okay to question, and that it's it's interesting.
Yeah, I preached about that, and when I did I bring my son with me, who is 8, to our first service, and so he was sitting in the pew, and usually he's coloring and stuff, but as I was telling this story, he was like, there.
Yeah.
What did that guy do?
Right.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I asked him later, like, what'd you think about it? He's like, that sounds pretty evil.
Yeah.
No, I think so.
Yeah.
Which is like what I take out of that is like, the point is to move forward past this human sacrifice. Like, let's not do this. I'll provide a different way forward.
Yes. And there's some folks who think that depending on your ideas on like biblical scholarship and how this came together, that maybe this was a tale to warn against child sacrifice, which like sadly we know was a reality among other ancient cultures of the time. So maybe this was like our ancient ancestors' version. But I also want to mention that it's really interesting. I believe the word that they use for Isaac, aside from his name, is a na'ar, which means like a young boy or a boy. But he also, as we know, our ancestors at the time lived to be very, very old. So I think it's really interesting to wonder, was Isaac, 8 years old? Was Isaac maybe even closer to like our age, which could have been still like a young man, a young boy, like that could have actually still fit if you're living to like 100, 200. So I think that also is an interesting question of, and the language, I think when he talks with his father, it feels a little more childlike, but that is an interesting question also the Hebrew kind of gives us not a whole lot of answers, is how old was Isaac, and does that change our idea of the story? Maybe it's a little more comforting to think if he was a little older, he knew what was going on, but it doesn't quite.
This to your 8-year-old
yes,
boy.
It doesn't quite feel that way, or in the way that it's rendered. I think visually, we usually don't think of it that way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I hope your son is okay, and
so.
he's not worried about.
I think it was just more shock of like, really?
Yeah.
That guy almost killed his son? That's terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that are tough to teach in Sunday school.
Yeah.
100%. It's a tough one. Yeah, for sure.
So you're part of your role is the like director of education, right? So So how do you deal with educating like kids with really hard stories? Do you avoid these stories, or do you?
I think there's like different levels. There's different stories that you maybe teach a certain way for really young kids. Certainly, we don't want to scare them. There's a lot of scary stuff in the Torah, certainly, and in the Bible. So I think stories like this we probably would not teach when they're really young, and then when they're a little bit older. We can talk about these stories, and we can kind of ask some of these questions, and acknowledge that there may not be a perfect answer to understand the story, and that's kind of a beautiful thing that we can share these sacred stories within our communities and also across communities, and that there's wisdom to be found in all sorts of different answers, and it's not about the answer, but it's about the conversation like the one we're having right now. That's really, really cool. So but definitely kind of like maybe your son was a little scared, right? Exactly. Maybe not quite, but it is tough when you talk about those kinds of stories. They can be difficult to teach to kids. 100%. Yeah.
All right. So what about maybe an easier story? You wrote down going forth with Abraham.
So the very beginning of his journey. So sort of the beginning of Abraham and his descendants as their own people. And the Hebrew, God tells Abraham, Lech lecha, go forth to a land that I will show you. And Abraham, and we know Sarah also, she's not named, but for them to really leave behind everything they ever knew maybe a very scary proposition, but I think all of us have had moments like that in our lives, maybe where we've gone forth and we've gone on a new chapter, maybe to a new place, and just sort of had to reestablish ourselves. And there's this beautiful idea, I believe, from the Hasidic tradition, that the words lech lecha can also mean go to yourself. So there's this. They also take this sort of like inner idea. Yeah, this sort of idea that like of course Abraham was going off with his wife into a new land, but also he was maybe starting a self journey, like a journey of discovery, of understanding, and that maybe it was also sort of an inner journey as well. So that maybe it's also not just the places that we go, but the ways that we internally evolve and change, and that God can be a partner with us on those journeys too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's really neat.
There's a little different angle on that, but I remember my Old Testament professor saying that, and then when it says like he went, like the word for went is just like walked, because in the ancient world, like most of the time, unless you were really rich, like you would walk everywhere. And so she would say like, so like the test of your faith from this story is not like what you say, but it's don't look at your words, but look at your feet. Where are your feet on this journey? Which is, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the things that we say and do also matter, but your feet, it's like, where does your faith actually take you?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. That's really cool.
Yeah. All right, Jacob's wrestling match.
Ooh,
you said there were interesting word plays, which I have to admit, I have no idea what that means.
So I can grab the book and get the words right if you want.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So this is the scene where we're moving ahead, and Jacob is going to reunite with his twin brother Esau. And
after he's deceived him and tricked him out of his birthright and his father's blessing and all that.
Yes. His mom Rebecca helped, but Jacob unfortunately was the one who impersonated him, and Isaac ended up giving him the birthright. And Esau's so angry that he says he's going to kill him, and so Jacob runs away from home. They've not seen each other since, and Jacob has since married Rachel and Leah and had all of his children, and Esau also has a big party with him also, a lot of folks, and it's very intimidating for Jacob. And if you remember, Esau was also like a hunter, and he was
a strong outdoorsman.
Yes, he had a particular skill set that Jacob did not have.
Jacob, he was quiet and lived in tents.
Yes, exactly. Yes, he was. Not the hunting, gathering type. I relate to Jacob a little bit more personally than Esau, but he is possibly fearing for his life here, and so this is the night before, and it says so Jacob's name in Hebrew is Yaakov. And it also says that he is by the river Jabbok, or in Hebrew Yabok. And then it says he wrestled Vaye Avek with an ish, with a man. And we don't know who that man is. They wrestle all night. Jacob pulls his hip socket a little bit. He's now got a limp. And he says, the dawn is about to break. And Jacob says, he has him in a bind, and the man says, you have to let me go. And Jacob says, I won't. You have to tell me your name. And the man says, I'm going to give you a new name, and that's Yisrael, or Israel, because you have wrestled with men and also divine beings. So there's clearly more at stake happening here than just some sort of wrestling match. The rabbinic commentators have lots of ideas about what's going on. One of the ideas is Esau, that he's wrestling with Esau. That they just have it out, which I kind of like.
I never heard that.
Yeah, and I mean, spoiler alert, it's a kind of an old book, so you should probably spoilers are probably not a problem anymore, but they have a beautiful reunion the next day. Like, there's a very happy ending.
Oh, you got to wrestle through it first.
Yeah, exactly. There is this idea of the sort of divine messenger or an angel. I think that's like the more sort of prominent idea, because it's sort of a divine thing to name and to give a new name, especially because this name is Yisrael, one who struggles or wrestles with God, and it becomes a name for the Jewish people, as well as Jacob goes by Israel kind of interchangeably. It's interesting. But those Hebrew words that I mentioned, Yabok and Yeavek, and then Jacob's Hebrew name Yaakov, there's another interpretation, again through this word play of words that sound a lot like Jacob's name, that again may be similar to Abraham, that Jacob is maybe wrestling with himself, and maybe he's wrestling with this terrible thing that he did to his brother, that was clearly devastating, and kind of set a new path on each of their lives. Maybe Jacob has some regrets about that, and that maybe to do so is a divine thing, and that you can change yourself and transform yourself by going through that kind of repentance, forgiveness, self-forgiveness. So again, these are all just interpretations, but it's really, the wordplay in the Hebrew is really, really interesting. And also because it says, he wrestled him and then he did this and he did that. It's not actually clear who's doing what. So also the language, it can be really difficult to parse out who's Jacob and who's this other man. So the language maybe also kind of lends itself to these lines sort of being blurred a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, to me makes sense that he would be wrestling with himself, maybe having some regrets, especially after he did this deception, but then he comes and then he's deceived in a similar way of
by his uncle.
Wait a minute, this is the wrong woman.
Yes.
It's okay, how did you not know, dude? Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, how drunk were you? But it's
how thick was that veil?
right.
Come on.
But maybe he gets some of this taste of his own medicine, and then as he's seeing these consequences, it's it's all coming together in that moment. Oh man, is this who I really want to be?
Totally. Yeah, I think Jacob has one of the most interesting arcs in terms of biblical characters, where he really is this sort of trickster figure almost in the beginning, and then really gets a taste of his own medicine, and then unfortunately perpetuates some of the same problems in having favorites among his children.
Didn't learn that lesson.
Come on, man. Didn't really learn that one. And then again, unfortunately, has his own sort of very difficult time with that, believing Joseph to be killed and all of that. So he has a really fascinating arc and growth, and thankfully it all turns out with a happy ending. But this is a really pivotal, mysterious moment. That's really, really interesting. And the Hebrew almost gives us more questions than it does answers.
Yeah. So as a rabbi, what does that mean for you as part of this Jewish faith community to be named after this guy? And to get your identity with Jacob and with wrestling with God.
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of legacy in a way, because he is the sort of the father of the 12 tribes, and he's also one of many of our sort of biblical ancestors. But that name Yisrael, one who struggles with God, I think really invites sort of the positive aspect of struggle and of challenge. I think it speaks to this sort of digging into the mysteries of the texts and questions, and that we're supposed to, in our tradition, have that kind of struggle, and it allows us to create our own sense of meaning, both as a community and also individually. And I think it's taken on sort of its own meaning, certainly recently, but I think forever. Sometimes it's a struggle to be Jewish.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tough to be Jewish, and it's certainly felt that way in the last couple of years. But it's a holy struggle, and that we wrestle with what it means to be Jewish in our own ways, in ways that makes us distinctive, but also being a part of our wider society. When people don't really like us that much, to put it mildly, that it is a struggle, but that the struggle is the holiness of it, and that obviously we aren't in this struggle alone. We're very lucky to have partners and people who are allies with us, and that it's not something that we take for granted in that.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wrote down was names. 'Cause,
Yeah.
like I said, I have, this kind of surface level knowledge of Hebrew. So a lot of what I remember and have read about are just the interesting plays with like interesting names in the Bible. So what are some of your like interesting Genesis names?
Oh yeah, totally. So if we can go all the way back to like Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam really means human being. And Adam is connected to Adamah, which means earth. So you have Adam and Adamah. So human and earth, like we're one and the same. Like we're a part of the earth is a part of us. And then Eve, Chava, is connected to Chai or life. So maybe as like the first woman, the first mother, and she's the first person actually to say God's name when she is, when she's naming, I believe it's Cain, her firstborn son. So she's the first human to like give a name, and she says like God helped me make a new human being, basically, which is pretty cool.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. And then we've got Abram, who becomes Abraham, and Sarai, who becomes Sarah. So kind of similar to Yisrael, God giving these names. And it's interesting that they both get the hey, they both get an H sound added, which is one of the letters in God's name, the Yod Hey Vav Hey. Yeah. So that's also interesting that they get added breath almost.
Because I've heard that it doesn't really change, like it doesn't change the root, right? It doesn't change the meaning. It just like adds something onto it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't change like the meanings of their names, but it's almost like adding an extra syllable or something like that. But it's that H sound that kind of that added like breath, which is also interesting when you think about life and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really neat. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So Abraham or Abram, father of nations, exalted father.
Yes.
But Sarah is like chief bull, right?
Yeah.
Which I remember, like as a kid, at some point I remember like seeing somewhere where it's like, which means princess.
Yes,
like,
it does. Yes.
Not quite, right? It's a little different than that.
Yeah, let me check and see if there's anything in here. But yeah, it's really interesting. And I think she is tough, this lady. So her name could mean princess from Sar. But also she is, where did it? Yeah. It says that maybe she was a princess, maybe she was a priestess. That she had certainly some sort of like leadership role, and that she, with Abraham, builds this new life together. And I think also, thinking of her, that Abraham has been promised to be a great nation, and that his offspring will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand in the desert. And yet here's Sarah not bearing children. I can only imagine how difficult that must have been, and then eventually to have Hagar bear a son for her. Essentially, I'm sure that was. And
she came up with the plan. She told him, like, here's what you got to do. Let's be realistic.
And I think to modern ears, that can just feel very jarring and very strange, and it is, certainly.
Here's some human trafficking,
right? Exactly. And how did Hagar feel about that? Absolutely, like, very problematic. And also, like you said, here's Sarah kind of being like the chieftain of her family, knowing that God promised this to Abraham, and that she helps basically do whatever she can to make that happen. So you also, I think, have to kind of respect that in a way. She's using the framework of her abilities at the time to try to make that prophecy come true. Maybe like Rebecca, also unfortunately tricking her son. These are women who still had as much agency as they could in making what they thought was God's will. Make it a reality.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like when you hear the callbacks to like, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was like, but also what about
Sarah and Rebecca? Yeah, and they have dialogue with God. They speak directly to God, and they have their own relationships for sure. So yeah.
So what about Hagar? What about Hagar?
Hagar is really fascinating. She's such a fascinating figure, and unfortunately, she and Sarah, there's a whole lot of tension that builds when Hagar is pregnant, and Sarah does not treat her kindly at all, and even sends her away. And Hagar, the word ger in Hebrew means stranger, but it comes to mean not like a stranger in like a bad way, but a people in the Israelite community who are not Israelite, but who are dwelling among you. And eventually it even becomes a term for a person who converts to Judaism, who is then equal among the people. Yeah, it's really interesting. And later on in the Torah, there are lots of laws about rights for the ger, for folks who are not Israelite but living in the community, that they also need to be able to rest on the Sabbath, and they need to have the same rights as other Israelites. It says that the Israelites left as a mixed multitude out of Egypt. It wasn't just Israelites who left; it was maybe other Egyptians and other people. So it wasn't. They eventually become absorbed into the one Israelite community.
Yeah.
But we have this very sad story with Hagar and how she's treated and ultimately cast out. But Hagar also sees God and also dialogues with God and even gives God a name when she fears that Ishmael is going to die in the desert. And then they are saved and become their own people. And eventually that word those words kind of like live on in a much more positive way of how do we actually have a society that's welcoming and has equal rights for people who are different than us. So hopefully that means there were some lessons learned. Yeah, maybe one of the first examples of like minority rights in a society, which is pretty cool and something we can continue to live up to, I think.
So it's interesting how like people take this in different ways, because I talked with someone recently that kind of from this story they see like what some people would say is like, oh, the evils of Muslims because they come from this side of the, like from Ishmael and Hagar. It's like all this, and it's like, well, hold on. Well, God like blessed her and them. Like, how do you get that out of this? But it's like, here's this story that is like foundational to like our faiths and like love and care for these strangers, outsiders, whatever. But then some people are like, oh yeah, see, that's why we don't like the Muslims.
Ooh, yeah. That does not sit very well with me either. I mean, I think it's not, Hagar didn't ask for any of that, and Ishmael certainly. There's this, speaking of wordplay, when it says that Ishmael is playing with Isaac, there's some wordplay with his name. Yitzchak means to laugh, because Sarah laughed when she didn't think that she would actually be able to like have a child at, I think it was like 90, which I can understand.
Who wouldn't laugh?
Who wouldn't? I would laugh, and a little bit more than that probably. But there's a lot of speculation about what that means. Was Ishmael? How is Ishmael treating Isaac? That sort of prompts Sarah to tell Abraham, you got to get, Hagar and Ishmael out. Was she overreacting? Was it out of a real sense of safety? But that being said, it sounds like some really complicated dynamics, honestly. And God does bless Ishmael, and God does bless Hagar. And there's this beautiful moment towards the end of this, not the end of Genesis, but I think it's after the Akedah, I think maybe a little bit after that, when Abraham dies and Ishmael actually returns in the story, and he buries Abraham with Isaac. So there's again this really beautiful moment of brothers who were broken apart, who come back together in reconciliation. We don't see the reconciliation. There's no dialogue. I really wish there was. Maybe it just didn't make it on there, but they bury their father together despite everything. And so I think maybe that's a message for us right now also, that there can be reconciliation. There are beautiful stories out there of understanding, and I think as peoples there's good people and bad people, and we can't paint with too broad strokes. And there's pain and hurt, and at the same time there's also moments where there can be reconciliation and love. And I think that's again just our Torah and our Bible can just be really maybe idealistic at times, but also I think can really inspire us to have hope and strive for we can hopefully bring that into our time, I hope.
Yeah. One of the things I've loved about being able to like look a lot through Genesis lately is that a lot of Christians, at least, like we hear a lot about these stories in like Sunday school growing up, and then maybe we don't deal with them too much as like we get older, and then you look back at the same story, seeing more of the complexities and the nuance and like not just the virtues but also the failings of all of these characters, and then it's like actually it feels less idealistic because it's like no, it's still like God still worked through these people. Yeah. And they were messed up, and they messed up their families and their kids, and they didn't learn, and it's like, what?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how it worked. Like, and that's like, oh, it feels so much more real than remembering the story of like, everything just worked out. Like, well, yes, but also like, it's pretty bad too.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think these are such human stories. It's really a gift, I think, that we have these stories, of people hurting each other and doing wrong by each other, and there's still moments of reconciliation and forgiveness. That they can also come around, but these were not perfect people, and thankfully we didn't get like an edited version that was
right.
But I think you're absolutely right. The stories that we learn as children, when we come back as adults, when we come back as parents, like seeing it in a totally different light, and being like, whoa, like that's a great example of how not to be, which I think can give us a lot of grace also, that these are our matriarchs and patriarchs, and yet they were as human as we are, and these stories give us, I think, a lot of inspiration, but also acceptance, so we can accept that we are not perfect, but we can work towards being better. If they could, we certainly we certainly can too. But yeah, so it's very fun and interesting, and maybe a little difficult actually to go back and be like, whoa, these are not the stories I remember learning in Sunday school.
No. At least I didn't hear that part when I was a kid.
Right, we left that part out. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating, and I love how in different seasons of our lives we can find renewed meaning and find just deeper connections, and that even like I said, that struggle can be a beautiful thing. That moment of like, whoa, it's cool. It's still a moment of coming closer.
Yeah, and it's growth. Like you of course you only need this when you're this old. Like you can't handle all of it. But now it's like, okay, now what can challenge me as an adult that I can still get something new out of this?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, let's see. How are you on time?
Good, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to ask, as someone who, like I said about the turning the story into an Islamophobic kind of reading of Scripture, there's also lots of ways where Christians have looked at these stories and turned them into anti-Semitic readings of Scripture, and so like people will look at some of these characters, they're messed up. See, the Jewish people are messed up. It's like, hold on, this is our thing too. But so, what do you think? How are ways that like we as pastors telling these stories and as Christians reading these stories, that how can we do a better job of not turning them into anti-Semitic stories?
Yeah, and it's a really kind and sensitive question. So I appreciate that. I think, I think we acknowledge that these are, sacred texts, and they're also stories for sure. And like we're saying, these are stories of human beings who weren't perfect, and that aren't necessarily there to serve as like, therefore any fill in the blank are, X, Y, and Z. And to our point earlier, I think that's how sometimes both Judaism and Christianity got in trouble with, so women, blah, 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 blah. Like it's something that, and certainly there are challenging stories in there that I think even Jewish commentary sometimes took to a place that we kind of look back and we're like, well, no, maybe not.
Like what?
Maybe not. I think some of the more maybe like particularistic stories, or certainly some of the stories with women, I think there's maybe a lot more to those stories that wasn't written down maybe. A lot of stories of women who were maybe silenced, or who we don't necessarily see the whole picture of, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that kind of understanding is really important. And we're always, there's all sorts of great stuff online of like the Jewish understanding behind these things. Not that there's one way to understand over thousands of years. As you may know, Jews have a lot of opinions and have had a lot of opinions throughout the years. So obviously what I'm sharing is just what I'm thinking off the top of my head or my own interpretation, but I'm leaving out many commentaries from many different places. So I think that kind of curiosity, and the beautiful thing is that those commentaries and those ideas are wisdom for anyone to share. So those are just some ideas.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think I've got some great stuff to work with. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation.
It's super fun. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if there was, in returning to these stories, something in particular that struck you, that maybe has enhanced your spirituality at all, or maybe changed the way that you think about these stories?
Yeah, I think in general, because of like all of these, because we started with Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, and then we're right now like preaching through kind of Jacob and Esau, and we'll get through like Joseph. So like those are the kind of things in my head, and just the like dark side of all of the family dynamics is something like I've heard some about like in seminary and some other things, but like spending as much time with it as I have, like I don't know, I didn't realize how deeply like how messed up those family dynamics are, and it's like, and it's your fault. Like you didn't see this coming when you like named your son like this little heel grabber and whatever. And it's like, what? Really? What were you thinking?
Yeah, that's a nice thing to remember. Yeah.
Like really?
Yeah. Totally.
I don't know, but it's been super helpful for me, and I've heard a lot of people like talking with Pastor Doug and I after of like, thank you. When I look at my own family, I remember feeling like ashamed because, well, our family has these problems, and there were these, you know, things that split off, and there was this divorce, and blah blah blah, and all that. Like, and I feel like I couldn't be open about that. And then I hear all these stories, and it's like, oh, it's the same thing in the Bible. Like, oh, we all like maybe have wonderful things that we want to talk about, and these journeys of faith and courageous step forwards, and also like there's all this baggage that maybe we feel ashamed about, and maybe you don't have to feel ashamed about it.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome.
So I think that's the big. There are probably other little things, but that's the big one for me.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. We can bring our full selves, and that's okay.
Yeah,
our whole authentic selves.
Yeah,
for sure.
What about you? Like coming, I don't know if you've had maybe you haven't ever taken a break, but like maybe you're just really more studious about it. But like coming to these like. How is your like evolution of your understanding, interpretation of some of these like foundational characters?
Yeah, I agree totally. The sort of flawed nature is really fascinating, and I think it's almost like it becomes more apparent the older you get and the more experiences you have. And for me, just becoming a parent last fall, I think now as a parent myself, I haven't dug too deep into these stories yet, but I think it really changes how you see sort of things from that side, because so much of this has to do with parents and children. So I think it's a lot, like you said, definitely some ways that we maybe don't want to parent. But to me, that's also fascinating. And then also God is also like a parent in a way, you know, and maybe sometimes uses language or doesn't say, hey, maybe that's like not the right way to do this. Like certainly has some hands-off approach to some of these things, which maybe people had to figure it out for themselves. But it's also clearly a growth experience for
Although there's some wisdom in that, like as parents too. Like some things you have to let people like figure it out for themselves, even as kids.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just starting at the beginning, so you know that a little bit better than I do, I think.
Well, we all, what's the saying? Like, everyone thinks they're an expert at parenting until they become a parent, right? Oh, nope, I don't know what I'm
there's
doing
so much I didn't know or understand until being on this side. But yeah, I think there's so much of that in these stories that I think for me is really gonna change the way that I look at it, but also have, like you said, maybe more empathy for these characters also. And it can be really easy to be like, oh, that was really crappy. And it is, but also to be like, oh, but you know, this stuff is rarely, you know, black or white. So we do the best we can.
Yeah. We've all got our crap, right?
We do. Yeah, we do. And that's okay. Yeah, exactly. And I love that idea that we can release some shame, you know, and we can actually maybe feel permission to wrestle with that and embrace that and work through that.